just business. This is nothing personal.
Here you go. Here you go.
Drunken sailors. That's the nothing personal word of the day. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. The New York Yankees today said that they will not ever spend like drunken sailors. That's an expression that was used. 1 second, please, Coca. I'm on the wrong day. Sorry. 4869. Drunken sailors. That's the nothing personal word of the day. It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. And just yesterday, the New York Yankees said, why would we ever spend like drunken sailors? No sooner did they say that they took out a fifth, and then another fifth, and then an eighth fifth, which is like 1/5 plus 60% of another whole set of fifths. And they signed Max Fried. Yes, the left-handed starting pitcher of the Atlanta Braves, erstwhile, to an 8-year, $218 million contract. There is no truth to the rumor that Brian Cashman staggered to the piano, doing his best Dudley Moore imitation, looking for anyone with braids running down the beach. God, that may be an old reference. That's the movie 10, and that's also mixing in the movie Arthur, because Dudley Moore played the best drunk of all time. I could do top 5. Where's Stu Gatz? What happened here? Let me bring you inside a meeting with the Yankees right after they get the call that Juan Soto's going to the Mets. Then they go on the Intergoogle. Owners do this. GMs do this. Presidents do this. They're getting ripped, tortured. Fans are losing their mind. There's discussion and the possibility that the Mets have overtaken the Yankees. This is a Yankees city. This is a Yankees world. You don't go to Europe, Asia, Kalamazoo, or New Zealand and see Mets hats. You see Yankees hats. Hard stop. The Yankees could be losing their grip on world domination. Steve Cohen's not just going for the casino to replace the chop shops. He's not just looking to win New York. He's looking to win the world. So the Yankees say to themselves in a meeting, they close the door, they open a little bottle of Jack, maybe a bottle of red, maybe a bottle of white instead, and they say, Brian, although the truth is they could have said, hey, ChatGPT. They actually could have said, hey, Coca, go get Max Fried. Coca would have said, I'm not a GM, what do I know? Here's how you get Max Fried. Call up the agent and say, what do you got? What do you got? You got 6? You're going to be 31, right? All right, what do you got? 6 years? No problem. We'll give you 7. Well, 7. How do you feel about 9? 9? Are you out of your mind? All right, 8. No way. Hold on, let me speak to my player. Hey, Max, the Yankees panicked. Hold on, let me call Boris. I'm very excited this morning because can you imagine that Max Fried, not represented by Boris, is the second best pitcher on the market, is the first lefty ever to get a contract like this, got 8 years, $218 million from a desperate Yankees. There's still desperate teams out there. Desperado. Scott Boras is calling him up and saying, Corbin's looking for a 9er, maybe a 10 spot. It can't be that a plan B would require you to have to allocate that kind in a panic move. This is the New York Yankees. You're that reactive? What is this, your first time with New York media? Your first time with social media? That 2 days after you lose Soto, you read 16 columns, 69 tweets, and you call up Maxie and say, hey, Max, we'll go 8-2-18. It's almost impossible for me to believe it. So, I had to confirm it. So I went on X, spoke to a few people. Here's the reaction that came out of Dallas. Jaw-dropping insanity with occasional doses of this is what happens when you let Steve Cohen buy a New York team and make the Wilpons happy by giving them a couple $2 billion. What happens is you've got a fan with money willing to do whatever it takes to satiate an unsatiable ego, Steve Cohen, to take over a city that is impossible to take over, but not for lack of trying. The impact all the way down in baseball is significant. And I'm not going to stand on the platform and tell you this is the end of baseball as we know it. I'm not going to tell you that right now we are guaranteed a work stoppage in 27 because owners are furious, GMs are incredulous, fans are despondent beyond repair. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm merely going to tell you that each year we see contracts like this. Much like in the NBA, much like in football, when Patrick Mahomes signed his deal, it was the number one deal. Coca, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Mahomes, is he even the top 3 highest paid quarterback these days? I believe he's somewhere below this recent signings, and that's the way the world works. When you are a free agent later, in terms of years, AD, you make more money than when you're a free agent sooner. It's why players today who stink make more in a year than Don Mattingly did in his career. That is part of sports. The real question that is being asked in baseball circles today is not the worry about Max Fried's contract. It is what are the ramifications as they try to keep a block of 8 teams from forming with the low revenue, low payroll, saying, Gnug, we're done. We are not able. This is a super league you've created, which makes John Henry super duper happy, though he doesn't really act super leaguey in this case, but it makes them very happy when they're at the top. But at the bottom, you are saying our fans don't have hope. We are forced into making trades or making signings at the lower end and then overpaying. For crying out loud, the Oakland A's, darn it, 12-24-69. For crying out loud, the Sacramento Aths, they gave Severino $67 million, not because they thought Severino was worth $67 million, but because they had to increase their payroll, just as we told you. So you've got pressure on the bottom end. You've got pressure on the top end. Where do you go as a team? And if you're one of the bigger markets and you are running a team like the Blue Jays, where you're trying to sign guys but you can't, you are then forced into making trades like they made yesterday as an example. A trade where they said to themselves, hey, Cleveland, we'll take Andres Jimenez off your plate. We're happy to do it. Except, guess what? If we do that, we're taking on this huge amount of money and we're increasing our payroll, but are we really putting ourselves in a position to compete even with the top of the top? So many different questions come out of this offseason. Getting back to Max Fried, they gave him a full no-trade clause. There's no opt-outs, no deferrals. If you're Max Fried, I don't need an opt-out. There is zero chance. Max Fried's agents went up to him and said, Max, you don't need an opt-out. You'll never get a better deal than this. I don't care how good a season you have. You're getting older and you're always hurt. CAA is whistling Dixie out of their pituitary gland that they got 218. I'll give you a wait to see about this. Wait to see official, Coca. Mark it. Put it in the document at davidsamsonpodcast.com. Wait to see when we tell you something's going to happen. If it does, we'll revisit it. If it doesn't, we'll still revisit it. It's okay to be wrong. Corbin Burns. Will Middlebrooks, my dear friend. Love you, Will. He came out with a tweet last night. What an unbelievable broadcast career he has made for himself. One of my favorite prospects who just got too hurt to be as good as he should have been. He is now killing it as a broadcaster. He tweeted out yesterday, Coca, that Corbin Burnes ought to buy Max Fried. He called it a Bugatti. Is a car. I didn't know what that. I thought it was some sort of sexual toy. I had no idea what it was. But anyway, I figured it had value. Why? Because Corbin Burnes is going to get more than Max Fried, because Corbin Burnes is better than Max Fried. We are going to do a official wait to see. Corbin Burnes will get more than $218 million. Book it, Coca. I wanted to text my old player, Nathan Eovaldi. We got him. Wow, here's an example of an old executive. I believe we got Nathan Eovaldi from the Dodgers, or we traded him to the Dodgers. Maybe we traded him to the Red Sox, got him from the Dodgers. Maybe he signed as a free agent with the Dodgers. I actually have no huge recollection at the moment. This is really tough on you, Coca, trying to go back on transactions. Was Eovaldi part of the D. Gordon trade? I can't remember, but we had him. Nathan Eovaldi is someone who is still a producing major leaguer. Remember what he did. What was the trade, Coca? David Phelps and Martin Prado. That was actually a great trade. Thank you, Coca. I haven't spoken to David Phelps in a while. He was a very interesting player to have. I don't know how we're going to get on David Phelps. And Martin Prado was the glue of our clubhouse. Anyway, let's talk about Nathan Eovaldi. We traded Eovaldi and Hanley together. We got Eovaldi from Hanley. There you go. All right, let's get back to Nathan Eovaldi. It's fun going down transactional memory lane. It's true that it's hard to remember all the transactions over 18 years. It's hard to do. There's too many. And it's not just me, by the way. It's not a Marlins thing. If you are from Miami, for the 6.9% of you, you are not alone. Every team does transactions. Eovaldi is the man with the two scars, two Tommy Johns. Very, very, very rare to be a performing player after two Tommy Johns. It's why Shohei Ohtani is not guaranteed to pitch effectively again. Dave Roberts, by the way, we are going all over the place. I'm sorry, Coke. It makes him crazy. Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, told us that Shohei Ohtani will not be pitching in Japan when the Dodgers open the season in only a couple of months against the Cubs on March 18th and 19th. The hope was that he would pitch, but people in the game know there was no chance, toilet pants, that he would be available to pitch coming off his torn labrum and coming off his second Tommy John, which they still haven't called Tommy John. So Ohtani will go to Japan. MLB will get what it wants because they're making so much money from the promoters to have Ohtani go back and play games, and he will start the season DHing. And the Dodgers just came out and basically admitted there's no way he'll be ready to pitch. It's hard recovering from two Tommy Johns, but Nate Eovaldi did it. Think about this market. The Texas Rangers, to retain Nathan Eovaldi yesterday, had to give him $75 million over 3 years. He's 35 years old. So he'll pitch 35, 36, 37 after two Tommy Johns, making $25 million a year. It really is an amazing movement in the market that the union will categorize and Scott Boras will categorize as, hey, this is the sign of health. The industry's doing great. As I encourage you to do every year, we focus on total payroll, not allocation of player to payroll. Take a look at total industry payroll and that growth. That is a far better bellwether. Then you take a look at outliers, and that's how you can really see what the health of the game is. Of course, on top of that, the number one thing that you know, as being a fan of Nothing Personal, it's about franchise value. And we have not seen the increase in baseball franchise values that you've seen in the other sports. So the overall health that you're all, or certainly Union Hawks, are decrying as obvious is much less obvious to those people in the game. A little shout out to my Miami people. Did you see the trade that the Marlins made yesterday? It's worth noting on this show, even to the 94% of you who don't care about the Marlins, I want you to focus on a trade because several of them are happening with players who are not anywhere near free agency. It used to be that if you've got 1 or 2 years left of control, there are really opportune times to trade that player. You're going to maximize the return for that player because the receiving team will get to have that player for 1 or 2 years. But often, when you've got 1 or 2 years left, you want to keep the player because you feel like, let's see if we can win with that player. Then the analytics departments took over, and they started putting players into the Sneetch's Starbelly machine. And part of the calculation of did you win or lose a trade, this is an interesting thing that has happened. We used to acknowledge that it's hard to know who won a trade immediately. When you're doing prospect trades, front offices would not ever tell an owner or a president, hey, this one looks good. If you win a World Series with the guy you get at the deadline, we would say that looks good no matter who you traded away to get that player. If you don't make the playoffs when you tried to add at the deadline, you say that was bad even if the prospects flamed out. You can play the result. The real way to do it is you wait to see. That's where all of this comes from. Because prospects take time. Love takes time. But now, front offices don't have that type of patience. Fans don't have that type of patience. Analytics departments want to give you an answer, akshav, right now. So they put into a computer the number of control years that a player has left. They put the expected value of the player, and then they come up with a dollar amount. So, for example, when a trade is made of the Jimenez trade, which we talked about, the analytics people had him as a value of minus $33.6 million. Given the number of years he has left, the amount of money he's going to get paid, there's all sorts of ingredients that get thrown in the Nutrafixer, whatever the name of that thing is that stirs everything. And out comes a result. For the Marlins, they traded Jake Burger, who has 4 years of control left. 4 years. And they traded him to Texas. And they got back 3 prospects. And they got back who, in their mind, are 2 young position players, 2 shortstops, 1 starter. And their view is that we traded away 4 years, but we got back 18, let's say, because players who are in the minor leagues have 6 years of control because they haven't made the big leagues yet. You could argue that they've got a tremendous amount of value. So in the calculation, it looks really good. But the fans are despondent. Berger was someone who they could cheer for. He had some power. He was going to help your big league team. And then all of a sudden, you're feeling like, oh, here we go again. And the Marlins did not exactly have a great day yesterday. They did 3 things that one of them they didn't control. 2 of them they did. What they didn't control is the Marlins lost the draft lottery that we talked about yesterday. They had a 22.4% chance to win, and they fell to 7th place. Not easy to do. The Nationals got the first pick in the draft. They were expected not to. The Mariners moved up to number 3. They only had a .53 chance of getting the top pick, but they moved into the top 4. Pretty good news for teams, but again, don't overreact if you are a fan of the Marlins or the Rockies who got the 4th pick. It's very difficult to guarantee performance from any of the spots at the top of the draft. So that was a negative. It's being perceived as negative, saying, oh, bad luck. There's people on X saying, oh, the Marlins deserve it. They tanked. They're not trying. They deserve not to get a good pick. Not exactly how ping pong balls work, but I digress. The self-inflicted wound for Miami came when their new manager was meeting the media, which managers do at the winter meetings, and talked about his excitement for having Jake Burger in the lineup. And then 4 hours later, Jake Burger was traded. We used to meet with our manager prior to the manager meeting the media every day, even during the season. Talk to the manager. Here's what's going on. Stay away from this. Pound on that. We're trying to move this player. Please talk about how great he is. We are not going to be moving this player. You can talk about him. This guy is up in the air. Don't mention him. How Peter Bendix did not tell McCullough to not discuss Jake Burger and his love of Jake Burger when they were trading him a few hours later is beyond comprehension. Negative. Not ideal. You see, the media is an important part of our job. I guess of my current job and also my old job. The media is the conduit of getting information from point A to point B. The media is counted on as being an expert in various topics. But the media can also be difficult. It can be difficult on front office executives, difficult on players. I don't think that media members, not many of them, have it out for people. I mean, obvious exception, Mike Berardino. But there are very, very few media members that put someone in their crosshairs. Something happened yesterday that got my attention. Joel Wolfe is an agent, and fans of the show know his name because he is the agent for Giancarlo Stanton. He is the person that we negotiated with when we signed Stanton to a then record $325 million contract. This is way back in, I don't know, Coca, 2015 is my guess when that contract got signed. He's also the agent for a player named Roki Sasaki. Roki Sasaki is that 23-year-old player from Japan who was just posted, and we've told you about him because he's not going to get a Yamamoto contract. He's a free agent, but he's stuck only with the international bonus pool money. And the rumors have been that he's going to L.A. San Diego is trying very hard to get him. Joel Wolfe, his agent, stood up in front of the media, and I have not spoken to Joel about this, but I found it very interesting that Joel Wolfe said that he believes, though he has not spoken to Sasaki on this issue, or sat down with him, I think he said that Sasaki could benefit from, quote, a soft landing in a small to mid-market team. And he talked about the reason is that he may want to be out of the spotlight for a while. Because in Japan, he is getting absolutely hammered by the Japanese media. They are furious that a 23-year-old superstar, maybe the best pitcher on the planet, is going to follow his dream of playing in the best league on the planet, which is Major League Baseball, against the best players on the planet. But the Japanese media is being tough. But why would Joel Wolfe indicate to the U.S. media, frankly to the world, that Sasaki may need a break from that sort of media scrutiny? Why would you ever indicate a weakness? There must be a reason. Is the reason to try to cover the fact that a deal's already done with the Dodgers or a deal's already done with the Padres? Is it possible that he's throwing a trial balloon out there so teams like the Marlins and the Guardians and the Royals will attempt to sign him? Well, everybody's basically got the same amount of money available to them, and all 30 teams would use every last dollar of their new international money, which comes in January of this year. 1 month from now, everyone gets replenished. They go to the money gas station, and they get their international pool replenished. All 30 teams want Sasaki because you're getting him for a small amount of money, and you get 6 years of control. There is no team that does not have an interest in a major league ready 23-year-old pitcher at the minimum, even if you have to give a $7 million signing bonus and then 20% to the Japanese team. Every team has that ability. The Dodgers have no advantage. Joel Wolfe made it clear he doesn't need to go to a team with a Japanese player. He doesn't need to have that sort of big brother, that sort of mentor. The thought was the Padres have the advantage because of Yu Darvish. The Dodgers have the advantage because of Shohei Ohtani. It's very weird that we as Americans talk that way. Do we ever talk about a white player or a black player or even a Hispanic player as saying there's an advantage for a particular team because there's another white player, black player, or Hispanic player? Why do we say that about Japanese players? I've never seen that in my career. And I was lucky enough to have the best and most famous Japanese player in our clubhouse for 3 years. Never once did a conversation come up with Ichiro. Yeah, I'd only like to go to a team with other Japanese players. Never comes up. I don't think when Sasaki decides which team, he's saying to himself, I want to be with Ohtani because I love him. I want to be with anybody. Suzuki on the Cubs. Darvish on the Padres. I'm not buying any of it. So I guess what I'm buying is that for Joel Wolfe to come out and say this, right around when Andrew Friedman, the president of baseball ops for the Dodgers, tells us that Sasaki is a major priority. He even gives a quote about him, by the way. What interests me about the quote, he has talked about his desire to be the best pitcher in the world, and we believe he's capable of being the best pitcher in the world. It's always tough when you have the best pitchers in the world, even from the same country or a different country, Yamamoto as an example. And you always like your shiny new toy better. We're all victims of that, especially around Christmas time and Hanukkah time. You sort of want to be the last gift in because it's always the shiniest. It always feels the best. First gift gets unwrapped, you get googly eyes, you're all happy. But then you got 7 more nights of gifts and you're like, oh, I like the last thing I got. It's newer, shinier. It's pretty interesting to me. We're going to find out. The Mariners want him. The Mets want him. I don't think you should pay attention to any of this, actually, in terms of what it's going to be a soft landing for media. I don't think it's going to be a factor at all, Coca. Okay, let's take a break. Do we take a break? Let's take a small break. When we come back, we're going to review a movie that was highly decorated by the Golden Globes, and it will be highly decorated by the Academy Awards, by the Academy. We're going to talk Cubs also. A couple things happen with the Cubs that are worthy of discussion. So come on back. Hi, we're back. Sorry, Coca. I didn't realize that. Usually I hear him say, we're back. For those of you watching live, we're here in Miami. Now I'm a little schwitzy. I just got an adrenaline rush when you're live and you don't think you're on the air. I wasn't doing anything bad. I was just not paying attention. Thank you for everything you do for us. We were nominated again to defend our reigning title as Best Baseball Podcast on the Sports Podcast Awards. Of course, I forgot to ask Coca to get a slide up there for our audience watching on the Nothing Personal with David Samson YouTube channel, and we can maybe get a QR code where you can go right to your screen and flash it and go vote. But you voted for us last year. We weren't nominated for Best Sports Business Podcast because we were usurped by the other sports business podcast that I do called The Sporting Class. I would have loved to have been able to fight against myself as the Best Sports Business Podcast. What better way to stroke an ego than that? But alas, we're going to be satisfied and happy by winning the Best Baseball Podcast and the Best Sports Business Podcast, The Sporting Class with John Skipper and Pablo Torre. So please look at your screen now, and if you're listening to this, you can also go to your device and Google Sports Podcast Awards, put in your information, and vote. Now, vote for Nothing Personal before you vote for Pablo Torre Finds Out in the Sporting Class, because I have to win. Because if I don't win and Pablo wins with me and Skipper, and then Pablo wins on his own for Best Sports Documentary, I'm never going to hear the end of it. So please, all the shows that we're doing with Dan this week here in Miami, it's been fantastic. I'm still finding the time to watch a movie, but it is very lonely in the middle of the night watching a movie. I've got to get to a movie. I watched Conclave. Dan Le Batard is here. That is not, where is that in the rundown, Coca? It is not in the rundown. So, I watched Conclave last night. What are you doing, Dan? This is not your show.
It It's not my show.
It's your company.
Correct. I'm interrupting your movie critique, even though that is a bit of a blasphemy because
it's not a critique.
You know a lot about movies, and I don't think Meadowlark has celebrated your movie knowledge well enough. The reason I'm coming in here now is because I was simply walking by and found it like deeply appalling that you would compete for votes on Best Podcast against Pablo Torre just because Pablo Torre has had more Meadowlark backing. He is MSNBC's favorite child because he's the model minority, like presents as perfect Asian with a Hispanic name. It's MSNBC Mana, and so his career has skyrocketed. And Meadowlark has left you neglected. They've made some things very difficult for you. For you to beg for votes for Best Podcast, I believe that our listeners and your listeners should make you supplant Pablo. He's won enough awards.
It is something. Now, do you know how it works? I don't know if you're aware of this, but Meadowlark actually promotes Pablo Torre, finds out for all these awards that he seems to win, whether it's best.
Oh, he just.
They don't do anything for your show or my show.
He just presents very well corporately. Like he wears the sweater over his shoulders and then goes and does intellectual things and makes statues out of butter and wins all the podcast awards. Why? Because as Nick Wright says, most expensive podcast in the history of podcasting. Everybody would make a good podcast that way.
It is pretty amazing, actually.
I mean,
just got to look at those.
He's got an army of resources. It's ridiculous.
I thought you were in charge of that.
It's absurd.
I don't know what you're talking about live at 9 o'clock, but I hope you're starting with baseball with your show that starts in only, 28 minutes, because there's a lot of baseball that we need to get to for your audience.
I want to do this with you on our show. We have neglected your expertise this week in favor of the haha. I'm guessing you'll probably make an argument that what the Yankees just did in desperate spending is a worse spend and more panicked than anything Soto related. That them trying to win the next day of public relations just threw a huge amount of money at a pitcher who's going to get hurt.
It's pretty amazing, and I've got a few nuggets that we gave to the Nothing Personal audience, but I may have saved a couple for your show just in case.
Special embargoed nuggets?
Just in case we actually talk about it, though we never do.
Can we get, Coca, can we please get, hold on a second, Coca, get imaging for me for our show of David's special embargoed nuggets where he is unselfishly not releasing them for his own gain on his show.
Nothing Personal.
He's giving it to us because it's the better stuff and in an effort to brown nose the bosses. Like you're saying, wait a minute.
It's bonus time.
If they're embargoed nuggets, they have to be better. They can't be just extra. They can't be scraps that didn't make it on your table.
Wait, there's something way in between scraps and better.
If you're going to embargo
when
something.
I talk about something, it's all interesting.
But when you talk about something, it's all interesting.
When I have
right? You
points,
are so you are the maximum barometer for interesting.
I only have 50 minutes. I'm not going to waste my audience's time with a nugget that is a scrap.
But you wasted their time by begging for podcast votes over Pablo Torre.
It's extension time.
It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
I didn't feel embarrassed. Thank you. That's really, God, that's some kind of support and love. Thank you, Dan. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Le Batard. Where were we? Conclave. What a movie. Ralph Fiennes is going to win maybe his first Oscar. You may not know of him, but if you don't, you should, I think. The English Patient. This is a movie about how you get a new pope when a pope dies or a pope resigns. And then you look for that white smoke. It's funny, me talking about this. I am Jewish. I don't have anything knowledge about white smoke, black smoke. Been to the Vatican, been in Vatican City. Have been surrounded by people my whole life who were smart about this. And so I was watching Conclave thinking, I'm learning something here, right? This is true, all of the intrigue. And it turns out it's a really interesting movie. And the movie is going to get nominated Stanley Tucci for supporting actor, Isabella Rossellini for supporting actress, Ralph Fiennes for best actor, Conclave for best picture, maybe even a best director, best screenplay, because you can't believe the drama that goes in. John Lithgow's in this. The drama that goes into voting for a new pope. It's insane. It reminded me of getting a new commissioner. Go see Conclave. It's well worth it. All right, let's get to Chicago. A couple things. I want to just send out prayers and thoughts to Ryne Sandberg. He announced yesterday that his cancer has returned, and cancer, as I know up close, and you all do too. If you don't, then you will, sadly. I hope he gets better. One of the great, great players and one of the great, great people. Hall of Famer. Let's talk about Suzuki of the Cubs right now. It is not a coincidence that Suzuki's agent is Joel Wolfe. We talked about him before the extended break that I took, not knowing we were coming back. We talked about him before Dan came in to talk about my shameless plug to try to get votes. By the way, sportspodcastawards.com. Interesting to me that Joel Wolfe took the opportunity to speak to the media to say that Jed Hoyer, the president of baseball ops of the Cubs, remember, Suzuki has 2 years left with the Cubs at $19 million a year. He is the Cubs' best hitter. Arguably, it'd be a short argument. Jed Hoyer called the agent to say, just so you know, I know that your player has a full no-trade clause because we had to give it to him. We didn't like it, but we had to give it to him. But there are a bunch of teams interested in trading for him. It made Joel Wolfe respond to that by saying, listen, I'm not going to have my player waive his no-trade clause to go somewhere and be a DH. And he finished the season as the Cubs DH. As a matter of fact, there's a teeny tiny universe of people who have a team. I want to say it better. There's a teeny tiny, just for cutting purposes, there's a teeny tiny universe of teams that my player will go to. Why does Joel Wolfe say that about his player? Because if he's going to be asked to waive his no-trade clause, you can bet your bippy he's going to try to get an extension from the acquiring team because he only has 2 years left. Why would Jed Hoyer go to the agent to talk about this unless, of course, he had a trade in mind already? Remember, Jed Hoyer is the one from yesterday. We told you this, that he is going to make changes to his team via trade. He told you that if a deal comes to us, and I'm quoting him, that makes sense to trade out of our surplus, we will do it. And then it comes out that he went to speak to Joel Wolfe to talk about waiving the no-trade clause. There is a problem with the order of operations here. When you have a player with a no-trade clause, you do not approach that player or that player agent until you've got a trade in place. You don't go up to him and just say, hey, we're thinking about it. You never know. We may try to move him. Thoughts? Do you want to give me a list up front? No. I'm going to the player and saying, we have a trade in place to this team. Are you waiving or not? Oh, I want another $1 million. I want an extension. Forget it. No. All right, next. Fine. You can be a DH for Chicago for the next 2 years for all we care. Or we'll sit you on the bench. The Marlins, not me. Before the Marlins traded Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees, they had him traded twice, I believe, to the Cardinals and the Giants, and G wouldn't want to go to those teams. And the Marlins said, all right, you're stuck here, surrounded by 24 guys who will make the minimum. And then the Yankees came in and saved the day, and the Marlins made the trade to the Yankees, which is where Giancarlo wanted to go, so it worked out really well for him. For most players, it does not work out that well at all. Joel Wolfe has a lot on his plate, but he is one of the best agents, really, really one of the best agents. He will deal with it all, but it is very surprising to me that Jed Hoyer is doing this. I'm hoping for your sake in Chicago, there is a reason. But from where I'm sitting, it's not going to be a good one. People around Dallas have been wondering, where is Rob Manfred? He had not been in Dallas. They had not really seen him. And then we found out why. The commissioner of baseball has been in Tampa doing what the commissioner of baseball does not like to do. He has been meeting with politicians, local politicians, including the governor of Florida. Can you imagine Rob Manfred meeting with Ron DeSantis? As though Ron DeSantis is going to get involved in any way in making sure the Tampa Bay Rays get a stadium built. There's a lot of other issues to meet with Ron DeSantis about, though. Rob Manfred went to Tampa because the Tampa Bay deal to get a new stadium has a problem. The reports that the city of St. Petersburg is ready to float their share of the public subsidy into that stadium is not relevant. The meeting on December 17th is what's relevant for the county to agree to float its share of the bonds. But that's going to happen. The problem is that the Tampa Bay Rays have gone onto the ledge. They're not quite hanging by their fingernails, which is where you need to be before you get a deal done. But they're out on the ledge, peering over, trying to find the best place for a selfie. And they've come out and said, we appreciate all of your help here, public, Pinellas County, St. Petersburg, city of, but we're not going to get this stadium open by 2028 when we were supposed to do it. That was the deal. We're only going to get it open in 2029, which means it's more expensive by definition, and that is true. But the public is saying, that's just an overrun. It's not our problem. You got to cover overruns. But the team is saying, we're not putting another penny in. It's not our overrun. The reason why we missed a year is because you delayed floating the bonds. But then the public said, we didn't really delay it. There's nothing in the contract that said we delayed it. We had till January to actually float the bonds. We're good to go. And then the team said, but wait a minute. You voted to delay floating the bonds, so we stopped all work on the project. We didn't want to throw good money after bad. And the public said, I don't even know what you're talking about. This is all standard. So then Rob Manfred called up Stu Sternberg, the owner of the Rays, and said, what's going on down there? You think you're going to relocate? You think you're not going to get this deal? We got enough problems with you playing at Steinbrenner Field for 3 years. The number of times that Bud Selig came to meet the politicians when we were trying to get a deal done in Miami. One time. Every time else, it was the president of baseball, a guy named Bob Dupay, fantastic president of baseball. There have been multiple meetings and multiple involvements of the commissioner's office with Tampa Bay as you go through the process, as there was in our 7-year process to get a stadium approved in Miami. But when the commissioner comes down, it's very pointed, very purposeful. The thing is, the effectiveness of the commissioner meeting has decreased as years have gone on. It used to be the commissioners could go down to a meeting like this, meet with politicians, and the politicians would be starstruck. They'd be all excited, and the commissioner would come down as the hammer. And the commissioner would come down and say, this is it. You guys have been screwing around for a decade. This is the final. If you do not get this building built by 28, by 29, whatever the year is, you are going to lose the team and not get it back. Cities and counties and states used to recoil. They used to be threatened. They used to act based on that threat. We don't want to lose the team. We're scared. It's not working much anymore. And the reason why it doesn't work as much anymore is that there have been too many ballparks that have opened that have not come with the concomitant development. There's too many new ballparks that have not changed the fate of the team the way they used to in the 90s when the Orioles opened, the Guardians, the Giants. When their new stadiums came, there was a total difference. The Pirates for a while. But teams realized, including the Marlins, when we opened our ballpark in 2012, that we were not getting the increase in revenue that we expected, planned, and had hoped for. So the commissioner coming down and trying to use relocation as a sword and having that sword pierce the financial veil of the public, county, city, state, it's become a bit dulled. So when the commissioner comes down, the message has to be slightly different. The message has to be one a little bit more conciliatory. The way Rob Manfred was after the hurricane in Tampa when he came out and said, after the Rays had lost their minds. He came out and said, we understand you got a lot of problems down there in Tampa. We are thinking of all of you, and we are praying and hoping that you all find a way out of this naturally disaster-created mess. So meanwhile, while the commissioner is down there, you have a concerted, planned effort. Good guy, bad guy. We've talked about that with you. The co-president of the Rays, Matt Silverman, while the commissioner was there, came out and said, will authorize the bonds at their next meeting. And then he continued on by saying, we remain ready to work with all key stakeholders to fill the funding gap their delay has created. Do you see the tone of that? It is not discussing whether there's a delay. It's acknowledging that it's a fact. It is not discussing the possibility that the Rays are on the hook for overruns. It is opening the door publicly to the reality that they're not going to cover the overruns. There is a legal battle going on between the city and county and team right now as they both look at ways that their original contract will either be binding or not. There are discussions happening with the commissioner's office about what to do because playing at Steinbrenner Field is not a permanent solution by any stretch. It's a total pain in the neck for the Yankees. It creates revenue issues for the industry. Something is going to have to give, and something will give. And my expectation is that the Rays will get their building built. They will not play at the Trop again. There will be some sort of deal that's cut because baseball has got to start moving forward with expansion. They cannot keep wasting markets the way they're going to waste Vegas. They cannot waste Nashville. They cannot. The Tampa Bay Rays will never move to Nashville, and you can mark that. Nothing personal pick of the day. Did you watch that last night, Coca? The Emirates Cup is happening. It was the quarterfinals on those crazy courts in Milwaukee. I can't deal with the colored courts. They blind me. I can barely figure out who's playing at home, who's not. Whether I forgot it was called Fiserv, where the Bucks play. What happened to the old Milwaukee Arena? If you know, you know. The Bradley Center. I miss it. Maybe it is the Bradley Center. Well, we had the Magic plus 7.5 versus the Bucks. I'm trying to watch the game while working on various things, not starting the movie till the second game ended, which was Warriors-Mavericks. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, the Magic are just, they're not good. And then Coca, I'm texting Coca, and he's like, dude, I spent enough time with you during the day. Stop it. They're missing two of their best players. The game is like taking forever. The last 2 minutes of that game took 20 minutes of my life that I'll never get back. It was absurd. Lillard goes ahead and dunks without any pressure at all. Basically, Lillard and Giannis won the game against no names on Orlando. But guess what? We covered. So we are 166 and 177. We've got two more quarterfinal matchups today. Let's talk about the Rockets and the Warriors. Interesting situation with the Warriors. They're putting Draymond on the bench. They're not starting him anymore. Watching the Warriors continue to play, you're sort of watching a dynasty as it tries to hold on, knowing that it can't. You're seeing that a little bit with the Astros right now, actually. Meanwhile, the Houston Rockets have put themselves in a position where they're a better team than the Warriors, shockingly so. The Rockets are only giving 2 to the Warriors, and my view of that is an old line. Of course, lines are subject to change, but an old line based on what was and not what is. We're taking the Rockets -2 over the Warriors. Well, we thank you for your time. Thanks to Dan Le Batard for coming into the show. We didn't get to a whole story because of him. The good news is we can do that tomorrow. I embargoed and saved a few things just for you, the Nothing Personal audience, tomorrow. And thank you for voting again at sportspodcastawards.com. Remember, it's just business. So when you're pressing the buttons and you do nothing personal, instead of Pablo Torre finds out, I will make sure to tell Pablo it's nothing personal.